In the news today, heavy rain from what was once Tropical Storm Lee is bringing another round of flooding to the already soaked Northeast. The storm's remnants are swamping roads from Maryland to New England, and overnight some 10,000 people were ordered to evacuate one New York town.
The house has been here 160 years, never flooded, never any water in it. So we spent the night, woke up the next morning bright and early. I'm getting ready to make breakfast. I walk outside and there is a river running on the street, down Main Street. It was just shocking.
Went to bed at 10 o'clock and didn't think that it was going to flood that badly. I woke up around 4 in the morning with a garbage can floating and banging on the side of the house. And I looked out and it was about, well, the water was about halfway up the hubcaps on the cars.
It was such a nightmare, and that's what people don't understand, how devastating that is. You know, you see it on TV and you say, oh, how bad, but holy mackerel, you can't imagine how bad it really is. I mean, I really felt like I died somehow.
Between September 7th and 8th of 2011, the remnants of Tropical Storm Lee dropped nearly a foot of rainfall on the village of Owego, located in the southern tier region of New York State. Less than a week earlier, more than half a foot of residual rain from Hurricane Irene had already saturated the grounds of the region. Additional precipitation from an advancing cold front off the Great Lakes carried even more rain to the area. The combination of these three factors brought the crest of the Susquehanna River, which runs through downtown Owego, to a height of nearly 40 feet. This resulted in widespread flooding and devastation, the likes of which had never been seen before.
I would say once every 2 or 3 years we have a flood of reasonable magnitude, maybe every 4 years. But this was definitely higher than we expected to see. But, you know, almost the whole village is in a 100-year floodplain, and I guess every once in a while, well, actually, they said that this flood is a 500-year flood.
But never thought it would flood. Completely taken by surprise.
It is estimated roughly 95% of this 20,000-person community was underwater. More than 75% of residential homes were damaged by the severe flooding.
This map here is designed to give us an idea of where the old floodplains were and where the new floodplains were. Of course, the blue is the Susquehanna River. The darker brown color is the old floodplain where you could expect at least annual minor flooding. The lighter color that's been added to the darker is the 2011 flood, which actually increased the floodplain to a point where it encompassed the whole village of Owego, which is this section here, and all the small communities along the Susquehanna River all the way to the Broome County line.
We've had water in the basement during other large hurricane flooding events, but nothing on the first floor, ever.
When the 2011 flood came, it was even more difficult because, first of all, it affected a lot more people, but there were many of those from the 2006 flood who had not yet recovered. And so they had gotten hit again. People think that the recovery for a flood is takes a year or takes months, and it's a multi-year issue. And some people never recover.
Right there is my house.
Kathleen Benker had lived in Owego for almost 50 years at the time of the flood, sharing a 2-story home with her 92-year-old mother.
About 4 in the morning, I looked out and the water jumped the curb and was around the house like bingo. So I told Mom we had to go, and Mom's screaming she can't go out in the rain without a raincoat. So by this time the water's up past my ankles in the house. My 92-year-old mother with her walker and me with my oxygen. And so we walked, I walked. My son went and got the car and drove it in the water and picked up Mom. And then they told us to go to Abide in the Vine Church because that's where the place was to stay. I didn't know how to find Abide in the Vine on the back roads in the dark, but I knew some people up on the hill, and I stopped in their driveway and was waiting until they got up in the morning because it was too early to knock on their door, I thought. So around 6, I saw a flashlight flashing in their window, so I knocked on their door. And I asked them how to get to Abide in the Vine, and they invited us in to stay with them.
The two stayed with friends and even rented hotel rooms for more than 7 months. While Kathleen had begun to rebuild her home so the two could move back in, her mother passed away before the repairs could be finished.
You know, I was opening this all up for my mom and making everything for Mom, and Mom couldn't hang in there. It was real hard on her, and she died in April. So I'm like here alone in this big open house and thinking, why? Because if it was just me, I would have just walked away. I wouldn't have fixed it up. It's just, I'm too old.
Kathleen was finally able to move back into her home in April of this past year.
I just sit here and cry mostly, because I just don't even know where I went. I'm just not the person I used to be. And I don't know where I went. It's just too devastating. I have no baby pictures of my kids. I had 5 kids. I have no baby pictures. Nothing.
It wasn't until more than a week after floodwaters receded that many Owego residents were able to return to their homes and assess the devastation. Phoebe Morris, the town's deputy mayor, saw more than 2 feet of water rise on the ground floor of her 160-year-old home.
The hardest part is the few days afterwards when you're still in shock and yet you're ripping out your floors and you're taking your furniture out and putting it on the front lawn. The pictures we have of the few days after the flood when you're just walking through tunnels of people's lives, people's furniture and books and everything that's the debris that piles up on the curb.
Your appliances are flooded, your furnaces and infrastructure, your house are flooded. It's a lot more to it than just getting electricity in your community. We have many, many houses to this date that still do not have electricity. And this is going on 12, 13, 14, 15 months later after the flood.
You know, you say 2 feet of water, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's literally, once you get 2 feet of water in the house, there's not much difference between that and 8 feet because you've lost the first floor. It just depends on how much wall you're going to take down.
Nearly all of Owego's business community sits on the bank of the Susquehanna in what is known as River Row. Although countless residential streets were flooded, many of these downtown businesses were hit the hardest.
This is about the height of the water in 2011 out here. And so if you look at the perspective, that's how much difference of how much water had to come through this river at that point.
Since Bob Lehman and his wife bought the Cellar restaurant in 2003, their property has flooded more than 3 times.
This is the original basement. This is where the original restaurant was.
After flooding in 2006 destroyed their entire business, the Lehmans moved their restaurant out of the basement and onto the ground floor, hoping to avoid any future damage. However, this move did not protect them against this historic flood.
It's a sinking feeling. I mean, what we went through in '06 to completely redo this whole place, and then have it completely destroyed in 11 again. What did we lose? Well, 95% of my liquor and beer inventory, all the food that was in the restaurants. I have a freezer downstairs that was 100% underwater, so that was completely gone. You're out of business for 3 months, so food's not going to last that long no matter what. Number one, you have a very low economy because of the recession. Then you have a massive destruction. I'm not a politician, I'm not an economist or anything else like that. The money just isn't there.
90% of the business community was affected by the flood.
You know, the general economy would make people anxious even without the flood, but the flood on top of the general economy makes people kind of concerned about, you know, the future.
It's just too hard. You're out of business, and you're out of business for an extended period of time. Even though you have interrupted business insurance, flood's an uncovered peril. But it's our life. It's all I've ever done. And I had said when we bought the building in '06, I said if we flood on the first floor, all of Owego's in trouble. Now the joke is, do we move to the second floor?
While the business community is slowly recovering, many residents are still waiting to move back into their homes. Local organizations have been working to help families rebuild and return to Owego.
If you look real close, you can see the difference in the wall, where the water was all the way up to the wall here, and of course, across this one, the wall now.
Jerry Pierce, a case manager at Tioga Opportunities, says he has worked on more than 175 recovery cases that have involved hundreds of volunteer groups.
Small groups or large groups, faith-based, school children, college people. We've had people fly in from Arizona to work for a week. They'd call us and say, do you have a house? Our skills are we can do drywall, we can do flooring. And I said, yes, I have a house you can work on. They fly in, pay their own expenses, and work on a house for a week and then leave. And then they send us a card thanking us for letting them work on the house.
It just amazes me, like how do they even find out about a little town like Owego, but there they are.
Mike Ellis is the executive director of Love Knows No Bounds, an Ithaca-based nonprofit. Since the flooding, he has been a central figure in organizing volunteer efforts throughout the entire southern tier. Ellis and his group were among some of the first volunteers to begin working in Owego after floodwaters receded.
The very first time we drove down to Owego, I was with a good friend of mine, and as we got close to Owego, we could see the water line on the trees. We could still see the mud caked on to the leaves, and then I could see the mud and the water line on people's homes. I had been in New Orleans a couple months after the storm where you could still see those kind of traces, and it was almost like a flashback for me. I went with a small group of people probably 3 weeks after the storm. Might not have even been that many. I know I was really itching to get down there. Anyway, we went down to muck out the basement of a family in Owego. And that's what we spent most of the day, clearing stuff out of their basement that had been saturated with silt and debris from the river to help them clear the stuff out and start to rebuild their home.
More than a year later, Tioga Opportunities continues to work with and send volunteer groups, including Love Knows No Bounds, into the region.
I thought a year after the disaster my job would be over. And I found out that there's going to be work for a long time, because every time I think I'm catching up, I get half a dozen new houses that say, okay, will you guys help us rebuild? And I say, oh, yeah, okay. And we pass it past our people, and they say, yeah, okay, we haven't run out of money yet. Let's keep rebuilding houses.
While Owego continues to recover, more than a year later, the tragedy of the 2011 flood will never be forgotten. While many homes and businesses were destroyed, recovery efforts continue to this day. And even in the shadow of devastation, the Owego community has become stronger over the past year.
It'll take 3 to 5 years before we're back to what I will call a new normal. You know, we won't be what we were before because we're going to lose a lot of houses.
I have no idea. It's one day at a time, for sure.
It's funny how they always say that it's only when you're under stress and only when you're dealing with a major problem that your true character shows. And I think the character of this community has shown a lot.